All right. I think this is going to work. Hey guys, is this weird for you too? Don't worry, I'm not planning on making a habit of this. Just trying to get my money's worth out of this setup, and hopefully this is going to make for some better look-ins, as I can't exactly show you gameplay of something that simply hasn't came out yet, especially with recent revelations about CyberPunk. So here we are in the precipice of CyberPunk 2077 finally coming out for real this time, for like the third time now. They promise. And before we get into the main reason of this video, I might as well be transparent about my feelings towards CyberPunk 2077 and CDPR. The game isn't even out yet, and I'm already kind of over it. It's like, we haven't even seen this game yet, but there's already official CyberPunk 2077 music, there's a comic, there's now a CyberPunk 2077 RTX 3080, and I could have swore before the 30 series there was some other NVIDIA dealie with CyberPunk 2077 before they got... what am I saying? Back when it was assumed that the game was gonna come out like before the 30 series launched. So, heck, we've even got a Cyberpunk 2077 phone, and we've got, I wouldn't be surprised if Muskie Boy tries to make a Cyberpunk 2077 Cybertruck, because they have merchandised this game to high heaven. Between all this and how some people are starting to treat this yet-to-be-reviewed game like it's going to be the second coming, it's starting to rub me the wrong way. Or it could just be that I'm a little peeved that ever since the Immersive Sim video went live, I've been asked once every 90 minutes if I think a game that hasn't came out yet is an Immersive Sim or not, to which I have to say, I don't know. I haven't played something yet that hasn't came out. And as for CDPR itself, while I am a big fan of what they're doing with older games on GOG, I have to admit that recent revelations have kind of soured my opinion of them, and it's going to be very hard to play Cyberpunk regardless of how it actually is, based on what I know now. So ever since the most recent announcement about the most recent delay, I've seen quite a few bad takes and heard story of people harassing the devs because they want their thing and they want it now. That's not cool. And neither is it cool that I'm overtly holding the script here. This is new. We're learning. What also isn't cool in the slightest is that folks who want their thing really badly are shouting down anyone that points out that some of the stuff that CDPR is doing is just outright not okay. And they're also shouting down any sort of warning signs. I've seen some pretty intense mental gymnastics trying to justify 100-hour work weeks for a game dev, and all the endless crunch, but we'll get to that in a sec. First, let's talk about a few of the warning signs that are visible around Cyberpunk 2077. First real warning about how Cyberpunk 2077 might not be the game that we think it's gonna be is that it falls squarely into the 3 strikes rule for delays. At least for me personally, I'm a big believer in that 1 delay is fine, 2 delays is kind of troubling because now they have repeatedly missed deadlines or set unrealistic goals, and when you get to the 3rd major delay, that's when it's time to take all your expectations, forget about them, and then take the bar and place it like an inch below the floor. Because at this point, there is clear mismanagement going on if they've had that many delays. Cyberpunk's been delayed too many times for me to feel good about how they're handling the later stages of development. And I know, there's a Shigeru Miyamoto quote about how a bad rush game is bad forever, and a delayed game can be eventually good. But we have to remember that Shigeru Miyamoto said that in 1996 about the Nintendo 64. It's been nearly 25 years since he said that, and a lot has changed about video games, and now that things are easily able to be patched, like, games that were rushed and came out bad can eventually become good. Like, look at The Forest compared to how that originally was. Like, it came out way too early for even what's considered early access, or look at, say, what's another good example? No Man's Sky. Or look at even Fallout 76 at this point is really starting to make a turnaround. But that's another story. With enough dedication, a bad game can eventually be good. But at the same time, first impressions are still important. This doesn't necessarily excuse rushing a game out in a crappy, unfinished state, but it also means that repeatedly delaying a game does not automatically make it good. If anything, it's now a sign that you should be worried. Secondly, there's been a lot of talk about how much stuff there will be in Cyberpunk 2077, but we haven't exactly seen a whole lot of it. Like, yeah, We've seen those gameplay segments that aren't exactly trying hard to hide that they look just a little too smooth for a human being to be playing, or that it's all very early in the game where everything is on rails, so they're establishing the story. Think like, say, the first 15 minutes of Prey 2017, the first 10 minutes or so of BioShock Infinite. It's kind of like, that's what I think that the gameplay we've seen of Cyberpunk 2077 is. It's just a very early game that's very on rails and looks very glossy. A lot of that big ol' 48 minutes of gameplay that we saw about a year ago, which, wow, that was a year ago. A lot of that was really cut up. It was cut up a lot, and I can't help but notice that a lot of it was like walkie-talkie cutscenes or people talking about stuff they're going to do, and not that much actual action. And yeah, a playtester said that they're 170 something hours in to their playthrough, and they're thinking it's going to be a 200-hour game. But when has a game ever hit 200 or even 100 hours without a lot of padding and treadmill work? I bring this all up because until recently, no one has really gotten a chance to try out Cyberpunk 2077 for themselves ahead of schedule, and everything we've seen has been extremely curated to the point that the gameplay trailer they released a couple weeks ago now has next to no gameplay in it. It's a bunch of sweeping city shots and the occasional 2 seconds of what might be HUD-less gameplay in there, but there's no actual meat and potatoes game. It's sure, I'm not the biggest fan of Doom Eternal, even knowing that some of my criticisms weren't exactly the best, but to their credit, we saw what Doom Eternal was gonna be like a good 2 months before it came out, whereas with Cyberpunk 2077, everything we've seen has been extremely curated and extremely cut up. As this goes live, we're inside of a week of Cyberpunk 2077 going live itself, and I haven't seen anyone in the sphere of YouTube or Twitch put out anything showing they've had a chance to play the game on any platform. And while I was recording some of this, CDPR came out with a warning saying that anyone that does put anything up on YouTube or Twitch before the game comes out is going to get hit with a DMCA, which that's fair. It's they're more worried about story, and that's acceptable. But that still doesn't allay my concerns that it's been 7 years, and aside from extremely edited trailer cuts, we have seen next to nothing about this game. You'd think we'd have at least something by now. And that brings us to the leak. I'm sure at least a few of you saw it, and even if that guy said bruh more than he pushed buttons on his controller, a normal person playing the game looks a lot different from what we've seen in the last 2 years of those hyper-curated trailers. We saw enough to where we were able to see what certain parts of the game looked like in reality instead of those hyper-glossy trailer cuts, and I gotta be honest, it looks a lot like first-person Grand Theft Auto with Deus Ex cutscenes, which, to be fair, essentially everyone does that with their trailers now for the whole purpose of putting out a trailer is to get people excited for the game. And what we saw from the leak was very early in the game, likely before we got any of the cool skills. And if we're being honest, Deus Ex plus GTA sounds really cool, but it's nothing like what the trailers portrayed. When we combine this discrepancy with the delays in launch, that it's making me worry. And I know that CDR has promised a lot. Maybe they promised too much, and we need to temper our expectations. Okay, so we've talked about the troubling things with this game, so let's talk about the troubling things we've seen with gamers rising up about how their favorite thing isn't available right this instant. The first thing I've seen people trying to bring up in response to the insane amount of crunch that CDPR is making their devs do is that such a thing is legal in Poland, which I'm not an attorney. I can't comment one way or the other because I'm not a barred attorney in any jurisdiction. And secondly, if I was, I'd probably be an American attorney, and this is Polish law, so I can't really comment on any of that. However, I will say that just because something is legal doesn't mean that people are going to like what you're doing. And I gotta be honest, I personally do not like in the slightest anyone making somebody work 100-hour work weeks, weeks on end, working those crazy never see your family shifts in order to get a video game out. It's people need downtime, people need to sleep, people need to spend time with their families and do their own thing for a bit. And that's a bad look if you're pushing things out. What really does it for me though is the hypocrisy of this all. If you remember, CDPR made a big stink about how they'd never do something like that when Rockstar got busted for the insane amounts of crunch they made their devs do for Red Dead Redemption 2. And now it just makes it so obvious that that was all just posturing and for brownie points. Because as soon as it became convenient for them to do it, they went right ahead and did it. And that's just a bad look no matter how you slice it. The second justification I've seen for all this crunch is that people are comparing game dev to other jobs like, well, the utility guys gotta work 100-hour weeks after a big storm. Well, yeah, but at the same time, the utility guy has many protections in place due to their line of work, and secondly, last I checked, no one has ever died because their life support machine went out for too long or froze to death in their own apartment because a game didn't come out on time. This is a massive false equivalency right here. Moreover, comparing an emergency situation to something that's never an emergency is just a bad look in general. If anything, if you're also comparing that to your own work thing, maybe you should reconsider your line of work because that just isn't healthy. Hell, I used to work 55 to 60 hour weeks during football season back when I was doing pizza delivery because I was fast, I was good at taking multiple orders in one sitting, and because I was the most reliable guy, I got all the hours. And you know what? That was grueling. That burnt me out. And that was just 50 to 60 hours. I wouldn't wish that on anybody, let alone 100 hours. And if anything, heck, that's food delivery. That's food. People need to eat. People don't need to play a game. Lastly, I've seen a lot of people say that this needs to be done because COVID or something or other, and that makes no sense to me. Yes, I've heard that we're somehow in the golden age of TV and content, but at the same time, we're also in a content drought, which is kind of confusing me. But that doesn't mean that we make the people who make the stuff that helps pass our lockdown hours work insane, never see your family types of shifts. If anything, it's an excuse to say, guys, this pandemic is really making it hard to get any reliable progress on the game, so we're just postponing to 2021 because we don't want to make mistakes. And I'd personally be more happy with that course of action because I'd rather play the game with no guilt on my conscience, knowing that the product I'm consuming didn't cause suffering to someone that made it. Kind of like how Bloodlines 2 did. But at this point, I also have to take into account with the hype blue balls that we've seen from this game, that possibly if they said that instead of 3 weeks delays, those death threats might have become attempts on people's lives based on how some people have handled this delay. So I've got 5 major predictions for what we're going to see in a few days in regard to CyberPunk 2077. And I think one of them has already came true, come to think about it. We're just going to go down the line here so that in the future we can look back and see how horribly wrong I was about everything as usual. So, first prediction. Within the first day, if not the first week, we're going to get a big, fat patch to fix all the oopsie whoopsies that happened on launch, a big day one patch. Additionally, there's going to be a lot of patches over the next couple months or so once the game goes out before Cyberpunk 2077 represents the thing we kind of expected it to be. Cyberpunk 2077 is going to be an enormous game by anyone's standards, and they're doing it on 2 console generations plus PC. That's a lot of different things to optimize for, and there's no way you can perfectly bug squash everything in one sitting like that before launch. I could be wrong though. It could be that these extra 3 weeks or so they took between November and December is to try and bug squash before release, but at the same time, that's a Herculean task considering the amount of platforms that are available to play Cyberpunk 2077 on, and there's just no way you can optimize for everyone's PC or everyone's console specs all at once. Prediction 2. There's going to be several ex-CDPR dev tells all stories in the next year after the game launches. Likely towards the end of the game's hype window, and it's going to be a lot like what we saw with Red Dead Redemption 2. There aren't going to be a lot of pretty things in these, and we're likely all going to feel at least a little bad for enjoying the game as much as we did, because we just can't have nice things anymore. Based on some of the stuff I've already seen, I have a feeling that some of these stories are already in the pipe, and certain outlets are just waiting for the game to launch to finalize everything. It's not going to be a fun time. Prediction 3, which already kind of came true. What you need to run the game well versus what they initially said the recommended specifications are going to be 2 vastly different things. Goes to show what being a slowpoke will do for you, because I had this already halfway written and fully outlined right after the news about the most recent delay came out, and now they went ahead and released new specs that are way heavier than what they initially said the recommended specs were going to be. So, sucks to be me. Although I am kind of glad I sat on this because I didn't want to rush it out and miss something. And now I can also talk about how CDPR isn't letting anyone show this game pre-release unless they've got a special deal going with like gaming press outlets, or how the game's gameplay got leaked and it looks radically different from what they've shown us in the trailers. So, mixed bag, really. Prediction 4, and again, not exactly aiming high here. There is no way this game is going to live up to 7 years of the hype machine. Even if all the questionable circumstances they've shown us around the game turn out to be like false alarms, even if everything is hunky-dory with the game, there's just no way that anything they do will live up to the near messianic amounts of hype that people have put towards this game. And a lot of people are going to be very disappointed, and a lot of people are going to have that denial phase where like, it's the best thing ever. It's like, oh, this cured my disease. It's like, okay. But let's be honest here. It's like, nothing is that good. And we've been putting way too many eggs into this basket for a very long time. Remember that we also thought these things with No Man's Sky, and look where that got us. Fifth and final prediction. This game is big. And towards the very end, a lot of stuff is going to feel undercooked or underdeveloped. Like, yeah, this game, we've seen a lot of stuff early on, and a lot of like the character creation in early game looks very glossy. But if this is a 200-hour game, there's only so much you can do, and they've talked about a lot of stuff they want to do. And as I'm recording this, they're doing another like media blitz where they're showing like all the stuff like photo mode. And yeah, that looks cool, but we have seen nothing of like what the end game might be. We've seen nothing of what like the mid to late game's gonna be. And we haven't seen like a full mission start to finish yet. We haven't really seen what the game looks like when we're playing it. And I get a feeling towards the end, we're gonna feel like, you know, this kind of feels like it could have been more. I reserve the right to be wrong about all of these. In fact, I really hope I am, because I'd like to enjoy this game too. I personally was looking forward to it too, just I have very heavily tempered expectations now. And 2020's been a rough year, and it'd be really nice to end on a high note. Hey guys, so one last minute update again is that apparently I was correct about prediction number 2 as well. It seems that a certain big box retailer may or may not have accidentally shipped out their super special collector's editions of CyberPunk 2077 ahead of street date, which is why we saw the thing on CyberPunk's Twitter saying, hey, if you stream or make videos of the game before launch, we're DMCAing you. And as it turns out, according to some guy on Reddit who posted some stuff about the game, it turns out that, at least on PS4, there is a 56 gigabyte day one patch you will need to download before you play the game. I don't know how that's going to affect digital downloads like, say, Steam, which let you preload, but, woo, I don't know if being a slowpoke at this point is helping or hurting me, because just the revelations and the hits just keep coming. So even with all this being said, of course I'm still gonna at least make one video on Cyberpunk 2077. Probably more. It's gonna take a bit because I'm a very busy dude and I've already got a lot of stuff on my docket, but I enjoy the game, or like I feel like I will enjoy the game, I should say, even with my expectations lowered, and I know there's a big audience for it. Even with the Cyberpunk 2077 fatigue, because they have merchandised this game to high heaven before it even came out, I kind of feel obligated, if I'm being honest, but I still hope I have a good time. Nothing in this video is telling you to cancel your pre-order or not to play the game, and like I said with my predictions, all of this stuff has the potential to be a false alarm, and then the question becomes, how do we enjoy this while knowing that CDPR treated their employees very poorly making this? Heck, all the warning signs could end up being true, and this game could still end up being great. It could be the best game of 2020 because aside from a few things that came out like before the Rona got bad, there hasn't been much this year. You know what, we're not doing a big drawn out ending here. I've got a lot of stuff to do. I've got a bunch of videos coming out this month because these are the big money months. Just pretend that I did all my usual callouts and stuff, and enjoy this cat video. Okay, that didn't break anything, cool.
Fluffily poof. I can see you. I have to hold this thing because it's now too heavy for the head strap. Maybe if I go around here, I can further bother him. Hey, how you doing, buddy? Well, would you like a chin scritch? I know the light's a bit bright. This is the lowest setting. Oh no, you're mad. You're upset. This is where Saucy Boy hangs out. He likes to go behind the green screen. And he's especially liking it now because we got a bigger green screen. Meow. He knows I gotta keep one hand above. Oh, there it goes, yeah. Yeah, you know, I've earned these nibbles. Oh, what's that out there? What is that out there? I'm probably like got a bad shot of you anyway. This is our lives now, cat. And it's gonna be great. How about a pet? You want a pet? No, you don't want a pet. I get it. You just want to be left alone. That's fair. Ah! Yeah, this with the media mod and the light, this thing's too heavy for the normal head mount. There's probably a fix though.